On this edition of Independent Sources, undocumented and uninsured. Millions of undocumented immigrants to lose access to health care if new legislation is enacted.
Water wars. Will New York City join the growing ranks of U.S. jurisdictions that are removing fluoride from their water supply?
And Señorita's Serenade. An all-female mariachi band defies conventions in more ways than one. Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Vianora Vinca.
And I'm Gary Pierre-Pierre. Millions of immigrants, documented and undocumented, are waiting anxiously as the immigration reform bill begins to make its way through the Senate. Along with the hope it brings to many, it also carries the horror that passing the bill in its current form will strip many undocumented immigrants of the ability to get health care.
That bill, along with the Affordable Health Care Act, will effectively strip an estimated 11 million people of access to health care, even if they pay for it themselves. It will also make it easier for undocumented individuals to be caught if they try to access these services.
So is there any recourse for these people? I tried to get answers to that and other questions when I spoke with Becca Telzak, a health advocate with the community group Make the Road New York. Rebecca, the last time when immigrants were left out of the healthcare debate, lawmakers promised us that, we'll address this issue when the immigration reform bill is being debated. Well, the Senate's committee has approved its version of immigration reform, and yet the immigrants' needs are not being met. Why is that?
Yeah, this is extremely frustrating for us. I work in an organization called Make the Road New York, and we advocate for immigrant rights in general, and especially we are pushing to have full coverage and full benefits for all immigrants. Back before healthcare reform passed, we were really advocating to be able to include all immigrants in healthcare reform. And even though healthcare reform was a good step in the right direction, it was frustrating that all immigrants were not included. And now we're talking, like you mentioned, about the Senate bill and immigration reform, and still benefits are not the top, are not being discussed in the way that we would like.
I'm really speechless because I don't know why lawmakers or policymakers will think that not including 11 million people is good policy for health care. How do they think it's going to benefit or hurt the country?
I agree. I mean, I really don't understand why it's that way. And I think obviously including more immigrants in the exchanges, which are going to be developed starting with open enrollment starting in October, and with coverage starting in January, which is like a marketplace to people to provide insurance at a lower cost to more people. The more people you include, the lower the costs are going to be. And so it seems like the more you would want to be able to include all the immigrants, especially since they're healthier.
It's been proven that going to the emergency room costs the state, the city, the country a lot more money than if people have some kind of health care insurance.
Yep, that's very true. And we need to keep pushing to make sure that on a federal level, immigrants are able to access the health care that they deserve. But I think, New York has traditionally been able to cover a lot more immigrant populations than the federal government has. And so if it's not going to happen on a federal level, it's really important that New York State step up and continue to provide the coverage that it has been doing over the years.
New York State, as you mentioned, has been very progressive in its stand towards immigration all across the board. But this is not a state issue. This is a federal government issue. Now, what kind of pressure you think are you guys going to organize around and really get this moving?
Yeah, there's a lot of coalitions, national coalitions that have formed, that Make the Road has been part of, and so there are a lot of immigrant advocacy groups that are part of these coalitions. And as a coalition, we've been pushing to be able to have full benefits and full coverage, health coverage for the immigrants who are in this provisionary period through the immigration reform.
Is Congress responding to public pressure? I mean, I thought that most of the polling that I've seen across the board has consistently showed that the country is ready for comprehensive immigration reform. And so if you're excluding health care, so what kind of reform are we talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to keep pushing and keep pressuring because because it's not going to be fully comprehensive if it doesn't cover the benefits and all the needs of the immigrants who are going to be who are going to become citizens through this process. And I think because, like I mentioned before, it then ends up becoming a state issue, which it shouldn't, because I think the federal government should be able to provide access for all of these immigrants for the benefits. But if not, as a backup, the state, New York is in a different situation than other states, and we're lucky that the state government is willing to provide coverage, such as we have programs such as Child Health Plus, which is a program that covers all children, doesn't matter what their immigration status is.
Before we get to that point, let's be clear on what we're talking about here. We're talking about the healthcare needs of 11 million people. Can you tell us what are the issues here?
In terms of?
The healthcare coverage that these immigrants should be entitled.
Yeah. Right, so we think public insurance programs should be accessible to everyone, no matter what your immigration status is. In New York, some programs are accessible to everyone.
And you were mentioning,
like I mentioned, Child Health Plus for all children up to the age of 19. There's programs such as Emergency Medicaid, which covers undocumented immigrants only during that one emergency. But ideally, all public programs should be more accessible to everyone. We also think that through the exchanges that are going to be up and running as of January 2014, everyone should be able to access insurance through the exchanges.
And we're not talking about free. We're talking about these people participating, paying like everyone else, right?
Yeah, exactly. Child Health Plus, that program is based off of paying a sliding fee scale based on, there's certain categories, and based on your income, you pay a certain amount. So you start at $15, start at zero, it's free for some people of certain incomes, then it goes up to 15, 30, 45, and it keeps increasing. And so, in the exchanges, undocumented immigrants right now are barred from buying insurance even at full price. And I think, even letting them pay into the system and being able to pay to access their own insurance would benefit everyone.
What options do immigrants have under this scenario?
So currently, immigrants who are citizens or legal permanent residents are eligible for all public benefits, such as Medicaid, Family Health Plus, and Child Health Plus. Immigrants who are undocumented, unfortunately, are only eligible for programs such as Emergency Medicaid, which covers an emergency right in the moment when you have it. Luckily, recently, it was passed that you can now pre-qualify for Emergency Medicaid, and you will have it for the full year. And then each time the emergency happens, the doctor has to resubmit the document showing it was an emergency and reactivates the Emergency Medicaid. There's also programs, undocumented immigrants are eligible for programs such as Child Health Plus, like I mentioned before, for children under the age of 19. It doesn't matter what your immigration status is. There's also a lot of, there's financial assistance, which is that all public and private hospitals have to provide financial assistance for all sorts of care that they receive in the hospital based on people's income, and it's a sliding fee scale. There's also HHC options, Health and Hospital Corporation, which provides a sliding fee scale for anyone who isn't eligible for other forms of insurance, and that also covers prescriptions within the hospital.
And these would still be available under the reform policy?
Yeah, all of those are available. Luckily, Emergency Medicaid, we're hoping that you'll be able to be screened for that through the exchange. And Child Health Plus will also continue to be eligible to continue to exist as a program, and will be through the exchange. And programs, safety net programs, federally qualified health centers, HHC options, and hospital financial assistance will still exist.
HHC is Health and Hospital Corporation?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and all those programs will still exist. We're hoping that people, once they go to the exchange to see what they're eligible for, will be screened for those programs as well. For HHC options and also hospital financial assistance, since a family will come and want to know what each person in the family is eligible for, and since a lot of families come from our mixed status, have someone who's a citizen, someone who is a legal permanent resident, someone who's undocumented, it's important that once someone goes to apply as a family, that they're screened for all possible options for everyone in that family.
Now, do you think that the senators will go back and really reinsert healthcare inclusion into this bill?
I don't know, it's hard to say. I do hope so. And I think we need to keep pushing and keep making sure that this is something that's being discussed, that the importance of having health coverage is very important for families to remain healthy.
Rebecca Telzak, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Still to come on the show, is New York's drinking water really the best as advertised?
Before that, Abby Shola has some other news.
Thanks, Vianora. Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic and community media. From the Queens Courier, City Council District 23 in Queens has been declared the city's most ethnically diverse area after new redistricting lines were approved. Councilman Mark Reprin, who represents the area, based this conclusion on results from the 2010 census. Minorities make up 70% of the district, Asians make up 40% of the area, with people from China, Japan, India, and Korea. 14% of the area's constituents are Hispanic, 12% African American, 15% Jewish, and 15% white ethnic. This includes Italians, Greeks, Poles, and Irish. Weprin says he's proud to represent so many groups, but there are challenges in learning so many languages and cultural traditions. Community organizer and gay activist Carlos Menchaca is hoping to become the first New York City councilman with Mexican roots. According to El Diario La Prensa, the 32-year-old is seeking to unseat Sarah Gonzalez of District 38, who has represented the area since 2002. Menchaca decided to run after what he says was elected officials' failure to help Red Hook residents after Hurricane Sandy. Feet in Two Worlds profiles Los Sures, a nonprofit organization helping to rebuild the south side of Williamsburg. The area, once dominated by Latinos, has seen a shift over the years due to rapid gentrification. The organization offers affordable housing and social services to longtime residents who wish to remain in the neighborhood. The organization also opened a museum last year called the Los Sures Museum that's to preserve Williamsburg's Latino identity by teaching visitors and locals about the area's Latino history. A blog called New York in French spotlights the city's French-speaking African communities. The website looks at the city's Cameroonian community. The piece highlights the group's music and dance culture included in family events like weddings and funerals. The series also highlights the Congolese. New York City currently boasts the country's second largest Congolese community. The Congo is currently the second largest French-speaking country outside of France. And finally, you can touch my hair. That was the statement of the day during an interactive public art exhibit hosted by popular Black hair website Unruly.com. During the event, Black women with different hair textures invited passers-by in Union Square to touch their hair. The website's founder, Anonia Opia, came up with the idea for the exhibit after writing an article for the Huffington Post about Black hair being the center of curiosity among other racial groups. Those were just a few headlines from the ethnic and community media. Back to Gary and Vianora.
Thanks, Abby. Ask most people in the U.S. and they would say that adding fluoride to drinking water prevents cavities and is good for you. Ask much of the Western world as well as China and the answer will be different.
In these places, fluoridated water has been banned due to health concerns and strong protests from the population that the process is equivalent to mass medication.
These sentiments are growing in communities across the U.S. 200 jurisdictions in the last 4 years have stopped adding fluoride to their drinking water.
Still, much of the American scientific community continues to support the practice, even with a recent Harvard study that links fluoride with lower IQs in children.
I spoke with New York City Council member Peter F. Vallone Jr. about why the U.S. is not in sync with the rest of the developed world, his concerns for New Yorkers' health, and the uphill fight he's taken to stop water fluoridation. Councilman, you've been called the fluoride-hating councilman. The local press said that you want people's teeth to rot. Though recently, science and even federal reviews have caught up with their work on this issue and they're backing up your concerns for fluoride in people's drinking water. Tell us what those concerns are for you.
Well, I was called a lot worse than that. And you know what? People who started this fight even before I did, they were called even worse. And I can't tell you how many people have said to me, you know what, when you started to talk about this, we thought you were crazy. But then we did some research, and we now can't believe that our kids and we have been fluoridated since the day we were born. So it's worth it. It's worth it. It doesn't matter to me that I'm called names. There are some brave people who came before me who started this fight. Now the key is continuing the fight.
A lot of people claim that this is forced medication, you included, forced medication by the government.
Yeah. I mean, that's the first argument. Let's assume it's helpful, which it's not, but let's assume it's something that helps your teeth. You know, what's next? If you use that argument that government can say this is helpful so you are forced to ingest it, well, what's next? We're all not happy enough so they give us Xanax in our water supply. There's some other super drug that they find out in our water supply. The principle of forced medication is the first one that should have banned this years ago. But now, it's not just me as an elected official. This was brought to my attention by doctors and pediatricians and dentists who don't support this. There is no, what I say is, if in doubt, keep it out. There's no consensus now in the medical industry. You're going to have some doctors and dentists who still believe this is good. Most of them have a financial stake in this somehow. But you'll have so many that don't believe fluoride is helpful. And if you don't have a 99.9% consensus on this, how dare you put this into our water supply?
So what's in it for the government?
You always track the money. There's a lot of theories about that, some that are out there, like it dulls an IQ of the public. And then there's some that make a lot of sense. Like, for example, the fluoride that's in our water supply isn't fluoride at all. It's sodium fluorosilicate. And it comes from, it's a toxic waste material that companies that that made fertilizers and polluted the Midwest with their factories had to get rid of. And so the law was passed that they couldn't put this stuff into the air anymore, so they capped their exhaust tanks or their smokestacks. And they had this chemical, which is a toxic waste chemical, and they had to pay millions and millions to get rid of it. So rather than do that, they put the scam where they called it fluoride, and now the government pays them. People pay them for this toxic waste that they would have had to pay to get rid of, and it goes into our water supply as fluoride, and it's not fluoride. The other day I was watering my flowers, and I tweeted, I just finished fluoridating my flowers, because 95% of this stuff doesn't even go into our bodies. It goes right back into the environment. And so these massive companies, again, follow the money, are now making money off their toxic chemicals. They don't have to get rid of them anymore. And we are now putting it straight back into our bodies, but most of it straight back into the environment.
Why is there so much lack of awareness on the part of the public about this issue when most of the Western world has stopped for a few decades in some parts putting fluoride in their drinking water?
You're right. Almost all of Western Europe has taken it out or never put it in because of everything we discussed, the forced medication, the harm that it causes, it based in many studies.
And studies have it that their incidence of cavities is just the same
exactly.
as ours.
It all comes from better dental care. Fluoride toothpaste, I mean, if there are people who still think, and it may be, I'm not a doctor or a dentist, it may be good for the tooth, but topically only. You have to spit it out immediately if you're going to put this toxic chemical in your mouth, which is why if you read a toothpaste tube, it says, if ingested, call poison control immediately. It's because of the fluoride. You have, a spoonful of that tube, you could be dead. And that's the fluoride in the toothpaste. That's nothing else in that toothpaste. It's the fluoride that's the poison. The reason people don't know about it, there are some powerful interests that support this at the Washington level. No one knows exactly why, but any doctor especially who comes out and is brave enough to oppose this kind of thing, they get made fun of by the U.S. Dental Administration and the U.S. government and by their peers. It happened to me.
Well,
it doesn't bother me, but imagine if you were a doctor.
Harvard just came with a study recently saying that it lowers the IQ of children.
Like most things with the advent of the web now, it's getting harder and harder to keep this quiet.
You introduced the bill a couple of years ago, and that fell through because you didn't have enough support. Who opposed it?
It got attacked immediately by the Daily News. They occasionally have a knucklehead of the week, and it was me. I was the knucklehead of the week for introducing this bill. And all he did was rely on 30, 40-year-old studies that show how great fluoride is. These same dentists that recommend fluoride are the same ones who recommended mercury fillings. So they would, and we've seen this happen with lead paint. We've seen it happen with asbestos. Even if you assume the intentions were good here, and a lot of people don't assume the intentions of putting fluoride in the water were good, but even if you assume the intentions were to help people, the consensus is no longer there. There are too many doctors, dentists, pediatricians, Nobel Prize winners who are out there saying this. It's not important that I'm saying it. I like to think I'm bringing attention to it, which is great. You're here. That's great. You're very knowledgeable about this issue. As I said, people are contacting me on Facebook and on Twitter and saying, I had no idea about this until I read that we think you're the same person and you are supporting this, so we took a look at it and now we agree.
What else can the residents of New York City do? Is it a matter of more petitions, perhaps?
Yeah. I would absolutely reach out to your council member, because I could still use the support to get them on the bill. They could reach out to the health commissioner, Tom Frieden, who's everyone is relying on, the mayor is relying on, the speaker is relying on. health committee chair. Her name is Councilman Maria del Carmen Arroyo. She's the one whose committee it's in. All of these people just need to be informed and told that their constituents think this is a good thing. And the more that happens, the tide will change.
We haven't touched upon this, but briefly, if you could tell us how much does it cost the city to put fluoride into water, and whether or not the money could be put to better use?
You know, we're in such dire straits right now when it comes to cutting our cops and our libraries and this and that. We're spending, there are estimates that it costs $10 million a year. The city will say it costs less, but they're not including the costs of just dealing with this hazardous chemical. I have people who work in DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, and they can't officially come out and oppose their bosses, but they're like, Pete, get this out. We don't want to touch it. If it spills, it's a toxic chemical. We have to wear masks and hazmat suits, and it corrodes the pipes. The pipes are corroded, and you don't know how much of this damage to the pipes is coming from the fluoride, but we've got, if there's a leak and a pipe needs to be replaced, it's probably from the fluoride. So the cost of handling it, transporting it, putting it in, and in addition to buying it alone, millions and millions of dollars per year that could be spent on so many other things.
A recent federal review has found that New York is actually putting too much fluoride in its waters. Talk about that.
Well, first of all, it wasn't that recent. They were sitting on that study for years, and they only released it after I put my bill in. We basically had twice as much as we should have. Now, I think it's a joke to even say that there's a proper dosage of fluoride. They actually say that anything under 0.06 is useless, but anything over 1.0 is dangerous, but anything in between is okay. We're not taking a measured cup full of fluoride every day. I mean, there are babies, there are people that are 300 pounds, there are people that drink gallons of water a day, and it's in your soups and your coffees and your teas and your salads and everything else. I mean, there are people that don't drink any water every day, and you're saying that the dosage has to be this exact for it to be, or it's going to be harmful? Fluoride has never been held safe for ingestion. No one's ever taken a fluoride pill that's been approved by the government. It's never been held safe for ingestion.
Well, the government says that it's not mandatory for various jurisdictions to have fluoride in their water, that it's voluntary, but yet...
It's not a federal law. As we've seen, there have been some places, even in New York State, that have taken the fluoride out, so it's not mandatory. But they do recommend it. They do recommend it, and I'm not sure why more governments have not taken it out, but because of the publicity that you're going to give this, and I'm going to keep giving this, I think you'll see more and more legislative bodies removing the fluoride. Hopefully New York, because when we do it, that'll be what tumbles the house of cards. Because when New York acts, everybody pays attention. So we need to get this done.
Peter Vallone, Jr., thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for the help.
Stay tuned. When we come back, falling in love with mariachi music. And finally, mariachi is a form of Mexican folk music. Traditional performers were usually men who played string instruments and wore the white shirts and pants of peasant farmers.
These days, there's a new trend: all-female bands performing in elaborate costumes. They're popping up on the West Coast and in Mexico. Judith Escalona profiles a mariachi group that's based in New York and draws its musical influence from around the world.
Flor de Toloache is a flower that ancient Aztec women used to make men fall in love with them. It's also the name of New York's first all-female mariachi band. Mireya Ramos created the musical group 5 years ago as a trio.
People are used to seeing a whole, a huge ensemble. But we started as a trio because there was no other option. I didn't know anybody else that would be interested in the band at that time.
Today, they are 9 members, all from different ethnic and musical backgrounds.
I thought it would be innovative, and my idea with the band was to create new music with mariachi instruments. That's being done now. It took a little while, because the new members of the band had to learn the traditional style and the instruments. Like Shay didn't know how to play vihuela, and she learned just to be in the band.
Shay Fiol, a singer and songwriter in her own right, is a founding member of Flor de Toloache. She was playing a fusion of folk and R&B when she met Ramos 10 years ago in a Queens recording studio.
She said, I'm going to start this all-women's mariachi. I didn't even really know what it was, but I obviously quickly learned.
I can't give you my heart because I can't share yours.
She sat us down and she played us these YouTube videos of the mariachi divas, and I was like, this is what the mariachi is, this is what we could be. I love the tradition of it. I love this dressing up, and I love being in the band. I love singing in duet style, and the kind of singing that I had to learn in order to be in this band was very different than the kind of singing that I did for my solo music.
Flor de Toloache eventually recruited Veronica Medellin, the only full Mexican in the group. Ramos herself is half Dominican and half Mexican. Others are also half Mexican, Colombian, Cuban, Argentinian, African American, and German.
I knew it was going to be international because we're in New York, and I thought that it would be great for other people to learn Mexican music, which is so diverse and beautiful.
But why all female? Ramos played with traditional mariachis in New York, but clashed with her male band members.
I thought that if I had my own band and I had all women, one, it would be a different dynamic, and two, it would be a great experience for me and for the rest of the women.
I just want to say thank you guys for mariachi music and stuff. All right, cool. Cheers.
Flor de Toloache now competes against their fellow all-male mariachi bands for traditional Mexican parties and quinceañeras. They've also carved out their own musical niche.
Our style is unique, and we have our own thing going, so it's not about a competition. For us, we just want to create music, and we want people to enjoy it and learn about the culture and know that you don't have to be from Mexico to play Mexican music, or you don't have to be from anywhere to play any kind of music. It's a global language.
Flor de Toloache is currently producing their first album and looking for a record deal. Maria Ramos is confident they'll get one. Judith Escalona, Independent Sources.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned.
Till next time, be independent-minded.